One.
Good afternoon. I'm Greg Longini. I'm the board secretary to the Chicago Transit Board. On November 10th, 2021, this office of the secretary issued a notice of change format of all transit board committee and board meetings scheduled for November 17th, 2021. There is currently in effect a statewide disaster declaration as a result of the COVID-19. Good afternoon. I'm Greg Longini. Month since the start of the pandemic, pursuant to Section 7E of the Open Meetings Act, the head of the Chicago Transit Authority has determined that it is not practical or prudent to conduct an in-person meeting in light of the ongoing disaster. This means that as permitted by this section of the Open Meetings Act, there will not be any in-person public meetings, and the Chicago Transit Authority public meetings of November 17th, 2021 will take place only virtually. Because the governor's disaster proclamation remains in effect in the state of Illinois, the meetings on November 17th, 2021 are being held electronically or virtually pursuant to the amended provision of the Open Meetings Act, which also allows for virtual public meetings while the disaster proclamation remains in effect. Chairman Silva, we are ready to begin the scheduled Finance, Audit, and Budget Committee meeting. Chairman Silva?
I'm sorry.
We're ready to begin, sir.
Good afternoon. I would like to call to order the November 17, 2021 meeting of the Committee on Finance, Audit, and Budget. Will the Secretary call the roll?
Yes. Director Irvine?
Here.
Director Miller?
Here.
Director Jakes?
Here.
Director Barkley?
Here.
Chairman Silva?
Here.
And let the record show that General Counsel Simons and President Dorval Carter are also in attendance at this meeting, and that myself and Jeremy Fine, the Chief Financial Officer, and General Counsel Simons are actually in the 567 West building, our headquarters building. So we may now proceed to agenda item number 2, Chairman.
Our first order of business is the approval of the committee minutes of October 13, 2021. May I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Director Irvine, seconded by Director Miller. Director Irvine?
Yes.
Director Miller?
Yes.
Director Jakes?
Yes.
Director Barkley?
Yes.
Chairman Silva?
Yes.
The committee's October minutes have been approved with 5 yes votes. You may proceed to number 3, sir.
Our next order of business is the finance report. Jeremy Fine.
Thank you. I'm Jeremy Fine, your Chief Financial Officer, and I'll review the system-generated revenues and expenses for the month of September as well as year-to-date. With regard to September revenues, we see a similar trend as what we've seen in the prior months, where fair and past totals are slightly down to an amended budget and original budget basis by $1.1 million on the amended budget and a little under $6 million on the original budget. Reduced fare subsidy is coming in as expected. However, this is half of what we have historically received and is significantly less than what we give out in terms of free and reduced fare rides. Non-fare box totals continue to come in positive by about $1.1 million on the amended budget and about $400,000 on the original budget. Overall, for the month of September, we see total revenues coming in at budget on the amended budget basis and down by about $5.3 million on the original budget. For year-to-date numbers with regard to revenues, they're seen on this page where fare and pass totals are slightly down overall by about $4 million and positive by about $10 million on the original budget. Again, reduced fare subsidy continues to come in as expected, albeit a haircut off of previous year's returns. Non-fare box totals down about $700,000 total on an amended budget basis and down about $12.5 million on the original budget. So overall, year-to-date revenues are down about $5 million, 4.7 on the amended budget basis, and by about 2.4 on the original budget basis. With regard to our expenses, we continue to keep tight controls in place on our expenses, where we see labor coming in positive on an amended and original budget basis by slightly less than $1 million. Materials coming in negative by about $1.4 million, but fuel and power coming in continued to come in very strongly, where we're positive by about $400,000 on each. Injuries and damages or security services coming in either flat or slightly positive. And other expenses continues to be a strong performer for us, where we see positive favorability on an amended budget basis by about $4 million and on an original budget basis by about 3.3. Overall, for the month of September, we see positive favorability on the amended budget by about $5 million and on the original budget by about 4.2. If you net these against our revenues, we're positive by 4.9 on an amended budget basis, and we're negative 1.1 million on an original budget basis. With regard to year-to-date numbers on expenses, again, following a similar form as what we saw in the monthly totals, dropping to the bottom line here, we see total operating expenses positive by about $38.8 million on the amended budget and by about $48 million on the original budget. Again, if you net these against our revenues year-to-date, we're $34.1 million to the positive on the amended budget and $45.9 million to the positive on the original budget. With regard to our public funding, we've seen continued progress and positive favorability on our public funding streams. For the month, we received about $13 million to the favorable on sales tax on the amended budget and a little under $15 million favorability on the original budget. With regard to PTF, the public transportation funds, it's about $6 million of favorability on the amended budget and about $9 million on the original budget. Real estate transfer tax came in positive by about $2.5 million on the amended budget and a little over $3 million on the original budget. Coupled with PTF on RET and ICE funding, we end up the month about $22 million to the positive on the amended budget and about $27.4 million on the original budget. Year-to-date numbers follow the same form, and you can see here at the bottom line, we're positive by about $147 million to the amended budget, and we're positive by about $171 million to the original budget. With regard to our federal relief funding, as we talked about last month, we've added on all three buckets of funding streams. The CARES was the original first bucket of federal relief funding. The CRISA was the second, and then we were recently allocated the third tranche of funding from the RTA, whereas we received $912 million of that total regional pot of $1.5 billion. The CARES funding, we are expected to draw down about $15.5 million for the month. That means that we'll have drawn about 93% of the total $817 million, which leaves about $55 million remaining. And we still have the full allocation of CRISA and ARP to cover future year shortfalls, which we'll talk about more in the budget presentation. There's one more slide with regard to our commodities. And the commodities, while that's coming back up, the commodities that we are looking to continue to purchase are particularly on the fuel side of the house. If we can flip to that page. Fuel, we have finalized the agreement with our future fuel provider for the outer years of 23, 4, and 5. We'll look to make selective purchases as market conditions avail themselves. As of now, we've seen a little bit of a dip in fuel pricing for those outer years, but we continue to assess the market, frankly, on a daily basis, and we'll make opportunistic buys as pricing avails itself. With regard to power and natural gas, we're fully locked in for the future years, but we will continue to monitor those commodities as well and look for selective buying opportunities there. This concludes my presentation with regard to the FAB. I'm glad to answer any questions.
How long do you think, we're gonna be able to use federal funds for the whole 22 or 23rd, up to what month?
Yeah, so we'll talk more about that in the budget presentation. But to answer your question directly, here we would expect that the three pots of funds, the CARES, CRISA, and ARP funding, to carry us through a majority of calendar year, which is also our budget year of 2024. We do have the unique opportunity as a CTA entity to compete for additional ARP discretionary funds that will help us close the remaining gap of 2024. And we're able to compete for those critical ARP discretionary dollars because we were the only service board in the region to have exhausted to have reached the threshold of 90% of CARES funding spent before the cutoff date in November. So again, that leaves us an opportunity to further close that budget gap, which we'll talk about in a moment. But again, the allocations that we received to date should carry us through the remaining portion of 21, 22, and 23, and into 24.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Barkley, any questions for Jeremy?
Not as many questions, just a comment. I wanted to say that on behalf of the board, I'd like to commend President Carter and Jeremy Fine and the CTA team for their professionalism and leadership in reaching a consensus with RTA and the other service boards on the regional allocation of the ARP funding. Dorval and his team were instrumental in getting the region to the finish line. This is a challenging time for all of the service boards as we work to restore ridership while providing safe and reliable services to our customers during this ongoing pandemic. Additionally, we each face our own unique challenges and priorities, and the ARP funding will be critical in assisting each of the service boards in addressing them. The region succeeds when all the service boards are put in the best financial position to provide service to its customers, especially essential workers and low-income customers who rely on transit as their only form of transportation. Dorval and the team kept this at the forefront of discussions to ensure that the allocations were made in an equitable manner. Lastly, I'd like to commend Dorval and Jeremy for their excellent management of the CARES and CRISA funding we previously received, which made CTA the only service board in the region eligible to apply for federal discretionary funding. So, I really would like to highlight that we appreciate the efforts that you guys made in rolling up your sleeves and fighting for the Chicago Transit Authority. So thank you.
Thank you, Chairman, and the rest of the board. We appreciate the support that you've given us as we've engaged in this process.
Thank you, Director and President. Director Jakes, any questions?
No questions, but in the Black church experience, after Director Barclay just read what he read, we would just say, and the doors of the church are open. So very well said, and congratulations to our president and Jeremy.
Thank you, sir. Director Miller.
No question at this time, just ditto. Thank you.
You and Director Irvine.
No questions. Just again, I echo and fully support Director Barclay's comments. Thank you.
Thank you all. Chairman Silver, there's no questions now, so we may proceed to item number 4.
Next order of business is the review of an ordinance amending ordinance number 020-108, the fiscal years 2021 to 2025 capital improvement program. Jeremy Fine.
Thank you. I'm Jeremy Fine, Chief Financial Officer for you. I'm joined today by Michelle Curran, who is the Budget Director, who will outline the changes, the amendment to the 21 through 25 CIP.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Again, I'm Michelle Curran, Vice President of Budget and Capital Finance. I'm here today to present an amendment to the 2021 to 2025 Capital Improvement Program, or CIP. In November 2020, the board approved the $3.4 billion CIP. The CIP was amended in May and September, and we are now proposing a final closing amendment to incorporate additional known changes. The amendment is being done to defer the CTA bond funding from 2021 to 2022 to reflect the timing of the funding needs. CTA has been able to use its capital line of credit to fund costs on an interim basis and allow the deferral of the bond issuance to 2022, resulting in interest cost savings. This amendment results in a net zero change to the 5-year CIP because the funding needs are only shifting from 2021 to 2022. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
I don't have a question.
All right, thank you. Director Barkley, any questions for Michelle?
I do not have any questions. Thank you.
All right, Director Jakes?
No questions. Thanks, Michelle.
Director Miller?
No questions.
Director Irvine?
No questions.
There are no further questions on agenda item number 4, Chairman Silva.
Since there are no further questions, may I have leave to place this item on the omnibus for board approval?
So moved.
Second.
Agenda item number 4 has been moved to omnibus. We will now proceed to agenda items number 5, number 6, and number 7, which will be combined into a single presentation package to the board.
Our next order of business is the review of the 3 ordinances. An ordinance adopting a budget for calendar year 2022 and financial plan for calendar years 2023-2024. An ordinance approving the fiscal years 2022-2026 capital improvement program and authorizing the filing and executing of grant and comparative agreements and amendments and related materials. An ordinance approving the implementation of fare structure revisions and approving the Title VI fare change equity analysis. Jeremy Fine.
Thank you. Again, I'm Jeremy Fine, your Chief Financial Officer. I'm joined by Michelle Curran, the Budget Director. We'll make a presentation that will cover all 3 ordinances. And on the first page here is a brief overview of the 22 budget highlights. The 22 budget is a $1.7 billion budget that requires $455 million of federal relief funds to plug the remaining gap from the impact of the pandemic. $300 million will come from that second tranche of funding that we talked about in the FAB from CRISA funds, and $156 million will be required from the third tranche of funding known as ARP. Again, we were recently awarded $912 million of the $1.5 billion total to the region. And again, CTA is in that unique position to be able to apply for additional ARP discretionary funds to close the remaining gap. The pandemic obviously has had a significant impact on public transportation, and as evidenced by the fact that the federal government has stepped in with those 3 historic funding packages. But again, ridership remains, a concern as we continue to move forward. We expect, though, ridership to grow 28% in 2022. To put that in perspective, the monthly ridership grew 29% in 2021 compared to the average monthly ridership during the pandemic period from April to December in 2020. Projecting ridership obviously is a difficult task in these times. We have engaged, as we did last year, MIT to help us conduct a national survey of other transit agencies around the country. Through that survey, our estimates came in line with what we were seeing nationally. But again, it's a lot of uncertainty out there kind of across the board. With regard to trying to drive ridership, one of the things that we can do and that we saw great success in was inducing and incentivizing ridership through fare reductions. We'll talk more about this on the subsequent page. And then finally, the 22 through 26 CIP program is shown as a $3.5 billion program. But this does not include any of the funding recently passed through the federal infrastructure bill. And there's some unique and exciting opportunities for us to receive more funding from the feds in the form of formula funding as well as discretionary programs. On the next page outlines the fact that changing commuting patterns really call for revised fare structure. With the board's approval and for a prior package of fare reductions that went into effect in Memorial Day, we saw some significant ridership gains throughout the summer. And because of the success of that program, we wanted to further solidify those changes and make those permanent, as well as implement two kind of additional changes that we feel are very critical for us to continue to move forward. Again, what we're trying to do here through all of these changes is to get people to ride that first ride, get those returning riders back and new riders on the system, as well as to get the riders that are riding to take more additional rides. And so again, the changes that we're proposing here is to remove the transfer fee. Again, we're very excited about this on pay-per-use type usage, to removing that transfer fee and make it a more equitable system. We're also looking to, again, solidify and make the changes permanent that we changed on the 1, 3, and 7 day passes, as well as make a change on the 30-day pass to make it more affordable. So again, we're excited to present these changes. And we think that, again, that this will help continue to drive ridership, as we saw during the summer period when those changes went into effect on the first batch of modifications. We're also looking in the future to continue to work with PACE and Metra to make the connection between the regional systems more seamless. So we're looking to integrate all passes with PACE and also looking to modernize the Metra link up. So again, this is a nice second iteration of changes that we're doing, again, to try to drive ridership so that we can get ridership back on track as quickly as possible, and which is critical with these federal funds that we've received. On the next page, we talk about some of the budget initiatives that we're funding here in the 22 budget. Again, we're maintaining full service. This has been a critical component for us to continue to deliver essential services and essential service workers alike throughout the pandemic. It was also kind of an underscore aspect of the federal relief programs that we maintain service as well as maintaining employment. But again, we also had to maintain full service because of the loads that we were actually carrying to ensure that we were adequately allowing for social distancing. We're also looking, as I mentioned on the prior page, to implement those additional fare reductions. We're also providing additional security through additional contracts, as well as the Refresh and Renew program, where we're improving cleanliness and security at 125 rail stations. We continue to focus on pandemic safety measures, such as the best-in-class cleaning regimens that we had before the pandemic, but enhancing those with electrostatic sprayers and clean SWAT teams. We're also looking to continue to supply hand sanitizer and masks throughout the system, as well as providing travel healthy kits to CTA customers. In addition, we're developing a real-time and projected passenger crowding dashboard that will allow customers, as they're coming back onto the system, to assess the crowding conditions before they embark on their journey. And then finally, we're looking to, again, create customer engagement pilots that lend a helping hand and friendly face to folks as they come back onto the system to ensure that they can navigate the system and get where they need to most efficiently. With regard to some of the workforce development initiatives funded through the budget, again, we have not had any layoffs despite ridership being about 50% of pre-pandemic levels. The Second Chance program, which is a nationally recognized program, has been a huge success for us. We've employed 1,500 people, 400 of those securing permanent employment with the CTA. We're also looking to build off some of the successes that we've had on the RPM program with programs such as the Workforce Partnership and Building Small Business Initiatives. We're looking to roll that program out to other capital projects in the future. The RPM Workforce Partnerships has hosted 300 individuals and trained over 200. The Small Business Initiative has assisted over 20 firms, securing over $5.5 million. And again, we're looking to roll out the success here on a broader scale throughout future capital projects throughout the system. We've also had a large platform of internship opportunities here at CTA, both college and high school, that we'll look to continue. We're also building the first of its kind here for the agency, a training facility, as well as a modern control center. And then finally, two initiatives that we've been undertaking, but looking to expand the platform through the creation of two new offices, are the Office of Innovation, which will provide policy, research, and project management resources for innovative technological implementations, pilots, and proofs of concept across the agencies, as well as the Office of Equity and Inclusion, which will focus both internally and externally on equity initiatives and working with external organizations and communities. On the next page, we outline again the gap that we would have without federal relief funding. That would be $456 million for our budget year 22. And again, we expect to use a portion of the remaining portion of the CRISA funding, or about $300 million of CRISA funds, as well as a portion of the $912 million of ARP funding that we've already been allocated for the remaining gap for 2022. This is primarily driven because of the fare box revenue is only estimated to be approximately 50% of 2019 pre-pandemic levels. We also continue to work with our partners at the City of Chicago with regard to restoration of the ride-hailing fee, but for budget purposes, that is not included in our 22 budget. Public funding is expected to increase 13% over 2019 due to some of the factors that we've talked about in the monthly FAB reports, including the capture of online sales, as well as the restoration of the 5% PTF haircut by the state of Illinois. Expenses are expected to grow by about 6.2% over the 21 budget, which is in line with CPI increases, as well as Social Security increases for the coming year, and is in line with what we saw in the budget last year of about 4.8%. Without federal relief, the system-generated revenue of 21% of total expenses is significantly below the required recovery ratio of 54.75. We have been working with our partners at RTA to secure a short-term waiver of that requirement. But again, this is something that we'll have to continue to watch and look and see if we need to have continued relief on that as we continue to as we continue to rebound in our ridership as we move forward. With regard to the gaps for the projection years, not only here for 21 and 22 is what we've talked about, but for 23 and 4, we see gaps in the $400 to $500 million range. Again, as I stated in the FAB report, we're expecting that the remaining CARES, CRISA, and ARP funding to carry us through and into 2024. Again, we have the unique opportunity to compete for ARP discretionary funds that will close that remaining $225 million gap, in 2024. And again, this is primarily driven off of the fact that, ridership nationally has been impacted, obviously, significantly by the pandemic. We're currently expecting ridership to be in the neighborhood of 55% for 22, 60% for 23, and 65% for 24. And again, this is in line with what we've seen through the MIT surveys that we've done nationally. And again, the recovery ratio reform was necessary. And again, we'll look for continued, assistance there if needed as we continue to grow out of the pandemic impact. With regard to the 22 through 26 CIP program, I'll run through a quick overview and then I'll turn it to Michelle Curran to walk through the details here. But the program size is a $3.5 billion program. Again, this does not include any of the new federal infrastructure bill components, which could come online in the form of federal formula funding, as well as potential opportunities for discretionary funds within that package. The current program is made up of federal funds, state motor fuel tax funding, as well as an expectation to issue CTA bonds. Obviously, we would prefer not to issue bonds, but we have had to in the near past and projected to here through this program because of the fact that we do not receive enough other local state funding to cover federal requirements for local matching funds, as well as just the overall need and the age of the system. The types of projects funded, we have major rail line projects that will help enhance capacity through RPM and RLE. We have the Allstations Accessibility Program, rail and fleet modernization, the electrification of the bus system. And as Greg highlighted, Mike Connolly will make a presentation after this presentation with regard to that, as well as the new control center and training facility that I previously mentioned, and continued efforts on the bus priority zones and the State of Good Repair program. With that, I'll turn it over to Michelle Curran, the Budget Director, to walk through the details of the 22 through 26 CIP program.
Thank you, Jeremy. Good afternoon. Again, I'm Michelle Curran, Vice President of Budget and Capital Finance. So the next several slides include some of the details around specific projects in the CIP. First is the Red Purple Modernization Project, which is a $2.1 billion project to improve capacity, travel time, ride quality, and safety on one of CTA's highest ridership corridors. Phase 1 of the project includes 3 major components: the Red Purple Bypass Bridge, the Lawrence, Argyle, Berwyn, and Bryn Mawr stations, and a new signal system between Belmont and Howard stations. Phase 1 is expected to be completed in 2025, and future phases of RPM are in the planning stage. Next slide, please. So this slide outlines the Redline Extension to the south, which is estimated to cost $2.3 billion. The Redline Extension would extend the rail line 5.6 miles from the 95th Street Terminal to 130th Street, including 4 new stations, park and ride facilities, and a storage yard and maintenance facility. We're currently in the project development phase and expect to enter into the project engineering phase in late 2022. Next slide, please. The Allstations Accessibility Program, or ASAP, is a comprehensive 20-year program to make all stations vertically accessible. 103 of CTA's 145 stations, or 73%, are already accessible. Phase 1 of the plan includes 9 more stations to be made fully accessible, including the 4 Red Line stations we just talked about as part of RPM, the Austin Green Line station, California, Montrose, and Racine stations on the Blue Line, and the State and Lake Elevated Station. Phase 1 also includes upgrades or replacements of up to 20 elevators. Next slide, please. The CIP also invests in the bus and rail fleet modernization. Bus improvements include purchasing 600 new standard buses, 70 additional electric buses, and overhauling a portion of the existing fleet. On the rail side, we funded the purchase of new 7000 series rail cars, overhaul work for the existing 5000 series rail cars, and the purchase of 4 new diesel locomotives. We also continue to invest in capital maintenance to target needs between overhaul cycles for both bus and rail cars. This concludes the presentation, and we'd be happy to take any questions you may have.
All right, thank you, Michelle. Chairman Silva, do you have any questions for either Michelle or for Jeremy? Chairman Silva? Can you unmute, please?
That helps. Thank you. How much money we have to apply for more federal relief money?
So again, we have the ability to solicit for and apply for the ARP discretionary program, and again that funding would help us close any of the remaining gap for 2024 that we expect.
And how are you going to raise that money that you had to?
So that is a competitive discretionary program that we apply for along with other entities, other agencies around the country that were able to comply with the requirement to have spent 90% of your CARES funding by a date in November. And as such, there's a handful of agencies out there that fall within that group. Those applications will be considered and there will be allocations made expected in March of 2022 with regard to the allocation of the total pot of $2.2 billion that was set up in the legislation for the ARP discretionary pool. And those decisions, again, will come out in March as to how much funding that we would receive and others would receive out of that $2.2 billion total pot.
Are you comfortable, okay, that we're going to get to that?
Again, I think that we're very competitive based on, what our needs are. Again, there are, others throughout the country that are applying for those funds, including New York MTA and other agencies across the country. But again, we'll see. It's a competitive process. Again, I think that based on our needs, when we need to use the funds, our geographic location, all of those factors will be taken into consideration. And again, we feel like we're very competitive to be able to compete for a slice of that total $2.2 billion pool of funds.
Thank you.
Director Barkley, any questions for either Michelle or Jeremy?
I do for Michelle. With respect to the accessibility program, how would the federal infrastructure dollars help us to speed that up?
So there's two components of that. Well, we expect to receive additional federal formula funds which we can use towards the program, as well as we expect some discretionary funds to be allotted for the ASAP program, or not just our ASAP program, but across the country. So we would apply for those additional discretionary funds and hope to receive some of that.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, just to further expand on what Michelle said, one of the new features in the infrastructure bill is the creation of what, interestingly enough, is called an ASAP program for discretionary funding. That is new. It was something that was developed and advocated for by Senator Duckworth on our behalf. We worked very closely with the senator and her staff in developing the concept of a dedicated funding source to support accessibility issues. And so we're very excited to have a new source of funding in an infrastructure bill simply devoted to this type of activity. And we intend to be very aggressive in pursuing those funds to support and, in my opinion, accelerate our ASAP program, which, as I stated before, the 20-year horizon was a floor, not a ceiling. And I've always stated, and I've remained committed to the fact that if we were able to identify additional funding, we would certainly look to see how we could accelerate the timeline for doing that. And I need to commend Senator Duckworth and her leadership on this, because she went out and created exactly what we needed to be able to do that. And we're very excited about what that's going to mean in terms of our ability to move forward on accessibility features to get CTA's rail system to 100% accessibility as quickly as possible.
And the next point was to Jeremy. I know we're trying to get the ridership up and back to where it was pre-pandemic, but I am getting calls, and I run into people all the time that love the fact that CTA was able to find a way to adjust the fares. That is very popular. And I think you guys did an excellent job in terms of finding a way to really win consumer confidence, because a lot of people, it has made a huge difference in their mobility and their ability to use public transportation and put those extra dollars back in their pocket. So, I told them it's not forever, okay? So because people might get spoiled and think that that's going to be the future. But right now, it's working for us. And I think we need to basically, really look at this in the future to see how we can keep this going. But right now, it's very popular in the Chicago area.
Thank you for that. And, again, I think that the federal dollars, we're kind of created in a way to allow the flexibility for agencies like the CTA to take an aggressive kind of approach here and trying to drive ridership back as quickly as possible. Because the best way for us to solve this problem long term is for us to become self-sufficient and to continue to drive ridership to pre-pandemic plus levels. So hopefully this helps, continue to drive ridership back to the system.
Sure.
Okay, thank you. Director Jakes, any questions or issues?
Just making sure I heard this correctly, Michelle. The Redline Extension, the project engineering will begin next year, the latter part of next year?
That's correct. We expect that fourth quarter 2022.
That's exciting. That's very exciting. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Miller, any questions?
No question. Congratulations. Good job. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And Director Irvine, any questions?
No questions. Just thanks again for highlighting the Allstations accessibility program. And I'm just, I'm over the moon about the infrastructure bill and the fact that we've got a funding source within that is basically copying the work that President Carter, you and your team have done, and that we're not backing into this, that we are leading on this. And I think that, this initiative really came from your efforts and your push to make this happen. And, Senator Duckworth has been an incredible leader on this, but you really set the table and made it possible, and let everyone know that this is where we can go and where we should go if we have the funds to do it. So I'm very excited to see how ASAP rolls out over the next fewer than 20 years. So thank you.
Thank you, Director Irvine. And I should point out, and I was remiss in not saying this earlier, we had a lot of support from the disability community in support of this. And I know that there was a huge mobilization effort among the disability advocates to make sure that their voices were heard around the importance of this. And with the leadership of Senator Duckworth, as you said, I came forward with an approach. The Senator basically turned that approach into legislation, and then the disability community made that legislation become a bill. So it certainly was a team effort, and everyone should be proud with the end result of this.
Great. Thank you for that information, President Carter.
Hold on 1 second, real quick, Greg. President Carter, question: how long has going back to the Redline extension? How long has this been in the works? Because I've just, I think I'm like three years on the board now. But how long has this been in the works?
Well, okay, the idea of doing Redline Extension has been around since I was a kid. So that gives you a sort of, broader sense of how long this has been discussed. But I would say in the course of the last, 8 or 9 years is when CTA really started to move the concept forward. The process to get to construction of a project like this is fairly complex. But when I came on board at CTA about 7 years ago, I made it a priority to move the project forward and to put the funding in place. As Michelle mentioned to you, we've already put hundreds of millions of dollars in funding for this project that comes out of our own local funds to get the project moving and to put it in a position where we can go and get the federal funding to build it. And I can tell you with the passage of this infrastructure bill, the money is now there for us to build it. And it's up to me and my team to now get this project into a position that we can actually lock that money in and make this project a reality, which is certainly long overdue. And certainly I know it's going to be a welcome addition and improvement of transit service to the far south side of this city.
Yeah, that's great. That is great. It's very exciting. Thank you. Thank you.
Right.
And congratulations.
Thank you.
Yes, congratulations. I would now like to call on our Chief Planning Officer, Mike Connolly, who is going to make a presentation. Mike?
Good afternoon. We'd like to give you an update on our electric bus program here at CTA, and we're taking the opportunity due to the large number of comments that you heard during your public hearing last week to sort of update you on our progress and then carry this forward into the future and discuss some of the items that were brought up. If you would go to the next slide. This slide actually lays out a little bit about our bus system, the number of buses we have. We're in service 24/7. We have 7 bus garages. They're indicated with the numbers on the map on the right-hand side there. Buses are often scheduled to be in service for more than 100 miles a day. And of course, the effective range with today's technology for a 40-foot electric bus is only about 70 miles. So we have some challenges ahead. If you would go to the next slide. In order to reach a successful electrification of a fleet, an agency needs a comprehensive plan for fleet conversion. We need sufficient charging infrastructure, and we need additional power supply from our grid. But this slide talks a little bit about our electric bus implementation study, which is ongoing. We're expecting to complete it before the end of this year in the next couple of months. It will include strategic recommendations and capital costs. On the left side, if you look at those blue boxes there, you'll see we're looking at schedule compatibility, charging strategies, and conditions to space. But the one I want to point to is the equity impact, because that's a vital part of all of our deliberations in looking at our electrification study, is looking at the equity impact not only to the areas and the neighborhoods and the people who live in surrounding our bus garages, but also to those on all of the routes throughout our system. If you would go to the next slide. This slide gives you a little bit of a summary of where we've been and where we're going. We're one of the earliest adopters of electric buses in the country. We have 2 that date back to 2014 that have been in service. In fact, they just received a midlife overhaul and updated their battery technology, which actually gave us about a 27% increase in battery density because the batteries of today are much more advanced than the batteries of 2014 when those buses were first built. We have, as you've probably heard and know about, we have 8 Proterra e-buses in service right now. We have 8 more on the property that are being prepped and ready to go into service fairly soon. And we have 9 more coming in the next couple of months. We have options for up to 22 more. We have en route chargers in several locations. And then we're looking at new procurements for e-bus charging and infrastructure out into the future. CTA's electric bus program has received over $130 million in funding, primarily through competitive federal grants. We always ask for money and we always put that money to use when we get it. If you go to the next slide, one of the things I wanted to try to address for you is some of the myths or the misapprehensions that folks have had about electric vehicles. Powering vehicles via the power grid does reduce greenhouse gas emissions, but it doesn't go down to zero because our grid today still relies on some fossil fuel sources. As more vehicles shift to electric, we as a region, we as an agency, we as a state, all need to make sure that we're expanding our renewable energy production to meet or exceed the added demand for electricity. CTA already does this with our electric purchases, and we have a no coal clause in our electric purchases for our traction power and for our power for our vehicles, our buildings. If you would go to the next slide. One of the myths that people have is that CTA buses are bad for the environment, and our buses are responsible for a very minor portion of the vehicle emissions. Less than 2% of all vehicles on the bus routes tend to be buses. They're more trucks and cars. And significantly, and this is an important thing that we want everybody to remember, public transit is the most environmentally friendly form of transportation. It's far more efficient than single occupancy vehicles. And we need to continue to pursue policies and investments that will prioritize public transit in the future to keep those single occupant cars off the streets. If you would go to the next slide. It's been suggested that we should stop buying diesel buses right away, tomorrow. And frankly, that is not even possible to do. We wouldn't be able to run our current system with our widespread over 1,800 buses out every day. Our buses that we're buying are lean diesel buses, and if we didn't replace these older buses in the fleet, some of whom which date back to 2000 and 2001, we would have a significantly lower quality of air in our area because these are the oldest, most polluting buses that we're replacing right now. And remember that the diesel buses that we buy today in 2022 will be replaced well before our 2040 electrification goal date. If you would flip to the next slide there, the diesel buses that we purchase here in 2022 are much more fuel efficient and emit 22% less CO2, carbon dioxide, 64% less nitrous oxides or NOx, and 91% less PM or particulate matter on a per mile basis than the older buses that we're replacing right now. So there's a big difference and a big gain in clean air by buying the buses that we're proposing to buy. If you would flip to the next slide. One of the commenters suggested that CTA has plans to buy 1,280 diesel buses in the next 2 years, and this is just not the case. We do have a contract and funding to buy 100 new diesel buses in 2022, and we have an option to buy 500 more in that same order. There are another 700 diesel buses that will reach the end of their useful life before 2026, but we don't have the funding or the contract in place to replace these buses at the current time. It's not in our CIP right now. Now, I will point to that last bullet and say, to the degree that the electrical grid power supply and the charging infrastructure can be scaled up, CTA would be looking to replace some portion of whatever our fleet we replace with electric buses as soon as possible. But we have to have the power and we have to have the charging infrastructure before we can reasonably go forward. If you would go to the next slide there. One of the commenters suggested that we were not buying electric buses because they have a higher purchase price. And this is simply a straw man. That's not the reason. We're looking, our primary barrier to immediate large scale deployment is not the purchase price of the vehicles, but the resources necessary to install the new power and the charging infrastructure to support those vehicles. We're aware of the significant operating savings potential. In fact, we're an early adopter, and we have better data than most other systems because we've been running those electric buses since 2014. So we know what our cost savings and operating and power savings are. We hope to realize these savings as we move into the forward years and scale up our electric fleet. If you would go to the next slide. And there were some calls for going to hydrogen. I think it was mentioned that Champaign-Urbana has gotten delivery of one hydrogen bus. They have a prototype by New Flyer manufacturer, and it is a hydrogen bus. But we're looking at all of the options for reduced emission buses. We're going to 100% electric bus fleet, and we'll continue to monitor and look at emerging technologies, including hydrogen. And where it makes sense for us, we will pilot these other technologies. I'll just mention, this is a historic fact that President Carter knows well about. We were a pilot location for 3 hydrogen fuel cell buses from 1997 through 2001. We were very early adopters of hydrogen fuel cell technology, and we're not avoiding it. We're looking at it. It's a range extender. Those are electric buses, whether they're powered with a fuel cell or whether they're powered with pure batteries. But we are examining all of the options, and we'll choose sensibly what is right for CTA and what makes sense for us as we go forward. If you would go to the next slide. The other concern has been, and we've stated it, that the electric bus industry is moving forward, but it's really not out of its early adolescence yet. And the manufacturers are struggling to produce enough buses for the orders that are being placed right now. And there are other aspects of this as well. One of them is, and it gets mentioned on the slide here, but is that trade-off between quick charging and slow charging. The buses we've had since 2014 are slow overnight charging. The newer buses that we're getting also accept quick charges on the route. We have chargers at Navy Pier, and we have a charger set up at Austin and Chicago Avenue at the west end of the Chicago Avenue route. There's a difference in battery life that really hasn't been proven out, partially because nobody's been doing quick charging long enough to really be able to say what is the best way to go. So those are technologies that are still being explored and still being piloted in a variety of locations. We're keeping our eye on what's going on all across the United States, and we're keeping an eye on what's going on in Europe as well. We recently went on a virtual visit to several electric bus properties in Europe through the American Public Transit Association and watched what was being done in Netherlands and Germany and France and in England as well with electric bus technology. So we've got our thumb on the pulse of the industry, and we're keeping an eye on it to look out for what's best for CTA as we go forward. If you would go to the next slide, and this is also about peer agencies. We're in contact with our brothers and sisters across the country and across Europe. And I mentioned before, the data from our e-bus operations is some of the robust and long-term information that's available. We have it entered into the consortium database, and all the other agencies are looking at what our operating and energy savings have been since we've had those buses in operation for so long, for more than 6 years. Our goal is to figure this out and move forward in a responsible, sensible way that will allow us to continue to operate service, but convert our fleet to a complete electric fleet by that target date of 2040. If you will, flip to the next slide. This is the last slide in the deck, and it sort of sums up where we're going and what we're looking ahead to. We're going to complete our study this year and release it. As I mentioned, equity is a deep underlying value throughout our study as we go forward. We're going to work to continue to secure federal and other funding, and we're very excited about the infrastructure bill and it creating some new opportunities for us. We're going to be coordinating with our grid supplier, with ComEd, for improvements to upgrade power supply. The power requirements for a garage that's got all electric buses are huge. It's a huge change to the way the grid is operated. We also need to modernize all our garages and equipment. You don't want to have electric bus charging inside of a garage that's got a leaky roof, for example. You want to have a good roof before you put electric bus charging in there. And we're looking to obtain additional funding because we have to replace the entire bus fleet. In fact, the first wave of electric bus procurements will be replaced before we hit our 2040 fully electrified date. And so with that, I'll stop and be glad to try to take questions. I think President Carter wants to address this issue as well.
Yeah. I think that I wanted to have Mike walk you through sort of what's been going on with the discussion around electric buses. And I think there are a couple of things that I wanted to reiterate in Mike's presentation. One, the importance of a plan. When you have an agency the size of CTA and the complexity of the way we operate, just going out and buying buses and not having a plan on how you're going to actually implement this new technology would result in a tremendous waste of money. We would have buses that were sitting around in locations that couldn't be operated. We would have buses that would not be able to meet the operational needs of our system. And, I don't think anyone wants us to basically waste public dollars in terms of doing this. The second point that I wanted to make, I think is a bigger point, as I mentioned with ASAP, the 30, 40 date that we're talking about here is, it is the floor, not the ceiling. I would welcome the funding that would allow me to accelerate the implementation of our electrification of our fleet. And certainly the new infrastructure bill puts us in a position where we may be able to do a whole lot more, a whole lot faster than we thought when we put our budget together. What does that look like? How do we ultimately do that? That's one of the reasons why the plan is so important to us, because it will give me the roadmap and it will show me how I can accelerate and where I would need to accelerate if I have the funding to do that. And then the third thing that I want to point out is that whether I was buying diesel buses or electric buses, I would never do a wholesale transition of my fleet to a new bus at the same time. And the reason for that is then you have to look at replacing that entire fleet at the same time. And as a practical matter, the funding that's available to engage in rolling stock procurements has to compete with the other $13 billion worth of funding needs that I have to get to a state of good repair. And so what you want, and any transit system would tell you this, is you want to have a rolling transition of your bus fleet over time. It makes it easier for you to manage different models and different technology, but it also makes it much more efficient in terms of the use of public funding to replace and overhaul your fleet over time as well. As Mike indicated, we have an aging bus fleet. It is already older than we would like for it to be. And so the need to replace those buses now has become critical, both in terms of cost, in terms of service reliability, and in terms of air quality. I will be the first to tell you that no, a diesel bus is never going to be as clean as a zero emissions bus. We have never suggested otherwise. But I also believe that we also have a responsibility here to continue to provide a level of service and a quality service that makes transportation a viable alternative to single occupancy vehicles. And that in order to do that, I have to have a fleet that I can depend on over time. And those two objectives, both a zero emissions fleet and a dependable, reliable fleet, are basically why the plan is so important, because it will allow us to achieve both. And that, along with improved pro public transportation policies and other things that drive people to public transportation, is going to have a much more immediate impact on air quality in this city than the time it's going to take for me to replace my bus fleet. So we are very supportive of that. We'll continue to be supportive of that. We'll continue to look for funding wherever we can find it to invest in and accelerate what we're doing. But I don't want anyone to think that the decisions we're making right now are intended to be clean air. Every decision we're making is pro clean air. The question is, how quickly can we get to a optimal state of operation? And that's exactly what we're trying to do as quickly as possible. And I think with that, we will obviously take any questions that the board may have about sort of where we are, what we're doing, and how we're going to continue to move forward.
Can't hear you, Director Silva.
Director Silva? Director Silva, any questions?
Yeah.
Do you have any questions, Chairman?
Yes, congratulations. Okay, I mean, it's a great presentation and very friendly transfer, okay, to every one of us. The problem, as I see it, is that the people doesn't know what we know in CTA. Is where we can make a change, okay, investing some money, okay, and create the marketing of what we're doing and how are we going, okay, to transfer, okay, our fleet, okay, into an electric fleet, and where are all the problems of that, okay? So it's something else that needs, okay, that, okay, in order to apply it to be successful.
No, I agree, Director Silva. One of the things that has become very apparent to me is that we haven't done a really good job of telling our story about what we're doing and why we're doing it. And I've already started talking to my staff about how we start to inform and provide to the public and to, quite honestly, to the advocates for air quality who I know believe in what we do and believe in public transportation as a positive impact on the climate, and making sure that they understand what we're doing, how we're doing it, and what we're trying to accomplish. So we're going to do a better job of that, and I'm already starting that process even as we speak.
Thank you.
Thank you. Director Barkley, any questions?
It's just the same point that Chairman Silva made. This is a messaging thing. We really need to get the word out. I feel we're playing defense on this issue and we're not playing offense. We need to get out there, tell the public, because we all understand it. I mean, it's very, very simple. Mike, you broke it down. It makes all the sense in the world, but the public doesn't know that. and it's perceived that, you know, we want to buy a bunch of old smoke-filled buses that, you know, pollute the city, and that's just not the case. But the message needs to get out there.
Thank you.
Agreed.
Thank you, Director. Director Jakes, do you have any questions?
No questions. Just want to say that, Mike, you handled your presentation and your facts versus fiction very eloquently. And that's all I'll say about that. You did a swell job in handling that very well. And you know, as each of you are talking about messaging, you know, is there a way to take the fact fiction and just send it out to whomever it needs to go to? Because the reality is, the more information you put out there, the more those that called in can take that information, try to pick it apart, and always find an antithesis to what is being presented. So I do hope that in the messaging, you know, we don't spend a whole lot of time, as you said, Director Barclay, and I think is great, playing defense. You know, we put it out there, it makes a whole lot of sense, and we keep it moving. But very well done to you and your team.
I agree with your comments, and you know, I've been making comparisons between ASAP and the electric bus program for a reason, and that is both issues have very strong and passionate communities and advocates in support of it. I will admit that I've probably done a better job of getting the disability community behind what I need to make happen to turn ASAP into reality than I've done with the e-bus process. And I think one of the things that I'm really looking forward to is the release of the plan, because just like with ASAP, when I put a plan out there and I made a commitment and I said, this is how we're going to do it and this is what it will take to speed it up, the disability community got behind both the plan and, more importantly, started having strategic conversations about how we're going to get more money so it doesn't take this long. And I think that we'll have the same type of conversation with the climate community with electrification of our fleet. As Mike indicated, there are a lot of partners that need to be involved in making this happen. You know, ComEd needs to step up their game in terms of improving the grid. You know, we're going to need to work closely with the city in terms of getting access to locations to allow us to put in charging stations and things of that nature. So, you know, there's a lot of work to be done to make this a reality, and it's going to take all of us to do it. And I don't want to be in a position where I'm fighting with people over this. And Lord knows I spend a lot of time doing that on disability access issues. I want to be in a position where we're all working together to get to the same common goal, which I think we all agree in, which is to get to a zero emissions bus fleet as quickly as possible. And hopefully we'll be able to show what we need to do that. And that will then form the basis for getting the financial support and the public policy support necessary to bring it home.
So, President Carter, did the climate lobbyist request to sit down with CTA to have the discussion before addressing their concerns in the public meeting? Or
No,
was it
the first that we
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I think the first that we became aware of sort of the concern that was being raised around our purchasing of buses was when we started to get the public comments. We had not had a chance to talk to them about it. And I think that's part of what I'm hearing from the board is that, you know, we should have been more engaged with them before this point to begin with. And I take responsibility for that because we've kind of been in the position where we assumed everyone understood that, you know, we were, you know, climate friendly and that everything we did was providing a benefit in support of the challenges around climate change, stuff like that. But it's obvious from the reaction that we got from this community that they didn't understand that and they didn't agree with what they thought we were doing. And so, you know, yeah, we have to go back and we have to spend more time with them. We need to engage them directly on what we're doing here. We need to get their support to find additional funding to allow us to be more aggressive in our plans. and we need for them to better understand the complexity of what it takes to do this. It's a very different conversation than going to your local car dealer and buying an electric car. And that's the reality of the service that we operate and the way we have to operate it. But having said that, this is doable. And, I'm fully 100% supporting our need to do it. And we're going to need this community support to make it happen. So we got some work to do, and we're going to get out there and do that work so that we can be on the same page and move forward in a way that's going to get us to the ultimate goal here.
Thank you, President Carter. Director Miller, do you have any questions for Jeremy or Michelle or for Mike or for President Carter?
No, not really. But no question. I think part of the concern, he's already answered most of it, but also, and I think I heard President Carter kind of alluded to it, with all of their question and concern, they're not believing that 2040 is going to be a reality date. How are we looking at that?
Yes, and I certainly heard that as well, that the belief was that we were backing off of our 2040 date. And the truth is, we're not backing off of that date at all. And if I can accelerate that date, I will do it.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Director Irvine, we'll finish up with you.
Thank you. And thank you, President Carter, and thank you, Mike, for for your comments and explanation. And I completely agree. And President Carter, I so much appreciate your attitude about this and your engagement. And I think, I've been on the board for almost 10 years, and the amount of comments we got on this, I think, was just about the highest we've gotten on almost any issue. I mean, Greg, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe we've got over 400 letters, emails on this topic alone. And, I'm President Carter, I'm very heartened that you see, those 400 plus people not as problems to be solved, but as allies to be engaged. And I think that's really what they are. And I was really happy to see that CTA staff will be presenting with a town hall tonight with Alderman Martin and Alderman Spada. So I'm super happy about that. I hope we can do more of that. And I think, again, we need to try as many different avenues as possible to get the message out there. Like I just checked CTA's landing page on our website, and nothing about electric buses there. I'm guessing it will be there, especially when we have the plan fully written and released.
Yes.
And there's some great information on CTA's electric buses page of our website, but obviously we need to get a lot more out there in a lot more different forums. And I think definitely that we have a lot of allies out there that can be in our corner and can fight for the funds. And I think there's so much recognition, especially from just the last few years, about how important climate change is and how much we need to all be on the same team to make changes happen. So I'm on the CTA board, and I care about transit because I care about the environment, and like you said, I want cars off the road and more buses on the road. So thank you, and I appreciate you working with this board to move our electrification goals forward.
Thank you. And obviously, I look forward to the support of the board as we engage this community and really, drive progress on this particular issue, because I know it's important to a lot of people, and we certainly heard from many of them as part of this budget process.
Thank you, President Carter. Thank you, Director Irvine. Well, Chairman Silva, I can finally say that there are no further questions on the budget matters as presented and also on the electric buses. No further questions, sir.
Since there are no further questions, may I have leave to place these items on the omnibus for board approval?
So moved.
Second.
Those are the three items moved by Director Irvine, seconded by Director Miller. Chairman Silva, let me now proceed to agenda item number 8.
Our next order of business is the review of an ordinance authorizing an intergovernmental agreement with the Cook County Assessor's Office to access geographic information data. Mike.
Yes, good afternoon. Again, I'm Mike Connolly, your Chief Planning Officer. The item before you would authorize entry into an IGA with the Cook County Assessor's Office. This would allow CTA to continue to access geographic information system data from the assessor. CTA has entered into an intergovernmental agreement with the Cook County Assessor's Office in previous years in order to have access to and a license to use this data at no cost to CTA. We are requesting renewal of this agreement for an additional year. We have requested a longer-term contract with the Assessor's Office. However, currently the Assessor's Office requires a series of one-year contracts. So we were here before and we're back to you again this year. This agreement would allow us to receive updated assessor's data, which provides detailed information at each property level. We get a table of about 1,800,000 records that usually date from the previous year. This data is used by strategic planning for planning purposes and for our NEPA, or National Environmental Protection Agency studies. It's used by CTA's Business Development Group and by our Real Estate Department. The data is specifically needed during the upcoming months for continued work on the Transit Supportive Development Study and the environmental work that we're doing on the Redline Extension project. I'm glad to answer any questions that you may have.
Let me understand well, okay, you don't have an order, okay, you cannot access the information with the Cook County.
Yes, exactly. Unless we do this IGA, they won't give us direct access into their database. But if we do the IGA, we'll have access, and it doesn't cost us anything. We just need to enter a formal intergovernmental agreement with them.
Good, I do.
Okay.
Thank you.
Director Barkley?
Nothing.
Director Jakes?
No questions.
Director Miller?
No question.
Director Irvine?
No questions.
No further questions on this item, Chairman Soto.
Since there are no further questions, may I have leave to place these three items in the omnibus for board approval?
So moved.
Second.
There's one item, a little typo there. Moved by Director Irvine, seconded by Director Miller on the board. We're finished with the ordinances now. And so now we can move to the contracts. So Chairman Silver, we can move to contract number B1.
Our next order of business is contract number B1, a change order for a maintenance contract.
Questions, Chairman?
I don't have any questions.
Okay, Director Barkley?
No questions.
Director Jakes?
No questions.
Director Miller?
No questions.
Director Irvine?
No questions.
Okay, no questions on B1. We can move to B2, Chairman.
Our next order of business is contract number B2, a project management contract.
Any
I
questions?
don't have a question.
Okay, Director Barkley?
No question.
Director Jakes?
No questions.
Director Miller?
No questions.
Director Irvine?
No questions.
Let's move to, that was B3, correct? Let's move to F1.
That's B2 too.
Oh, no, we need
Was
to
that-
do B3.
That was B2.
That was B2. I'm sorry. I'm getting confused. Then let's move on to B3. I'm sorry.
Our next order of business is contract number B3, a change order for the Wilson Station contract.
Sir?
I don't have questions.
Director Barkley?
No questions.
Director Jakes?
No questions.
Director Miller?
No questions.
Director Irvine?
No questions.
Okay, now we can go to F1.
Our next order of business is contract number F1, an RFP for a human resource management contract.
Question, sir?
I don't have a questions.
Director Barkley?
No questions.
Director Jakes?
No questions.
Director Miller?
No questions.
Director Irvine?
No questions.
No questions on that, so we can move to H1, sir.
On 9A, sorry. Our final order of business is contract number H1, an RFP for security services. No
Questions?
questions.
Director Barkley?
No question.
Director Jakes?
No questions.
Director Miller?
No questions.
Director Irvine?
No questions.
Irvine. No questions. All right, then we're finished with that. So we go to 9A, number 9A. Chairman Silva?
Since there are no further questions on the contracts, may I have leave to place the 5 contracts on the omnibus?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Director Irvine, seconded by Director Miller, the contracts have been put on the omnibus, so we can move to number 9B.
Since there is no further business to come before the committee, may I have a motion to approve the omnibus and recommend the omnibus for board approval?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded by Directors Irvine and Miller. I will now take a vote on the omnibus package. Director Irvine,
Yes.
Director Miller,
Yes.
Director Jakes,
Yes.
Director Barkley,
Yes.
Chairman Silva.
Yes.
The motion to approve the omnibus passes with 5 yes votes, sir. We can move on to agenda item number 10.
And finally, may I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Irvine, seconded by Miller. The vote to adjourn. Director Irvine,
Yes.
Director Miller,
Yes.
Director Jakes,
Yes.
Director Barkley,
Yes.
Chairman Silva.
Yes.
The vote to adjourn is five yes votes to adjourn. It is now 3:52. The board meeting will begin at 4 p.m. in 8 minutes. Good afternoon.
Recording in progress.
Good afternoon. This is Greg Longini of the CTA Board again. We're about to start the Transit Board meeting. Chairman Barkley, we may begin whenever you wish.
Good afternoon. I would like to call to order the regularly scheduled meeting of the Chicago Transit Board for November 17th, 2021. Would the Secretary call the roll, please?
Yes, sir. Director Silva.
Here.
Director Irvine.
Here.
Director Miller.
Here.
Director Jakes.
Here.
Chairman Barkley.
Here.
We have a quorum with all 5 members of the board present, sir.
Our first order of business is public comment. Greg?
We have no spoken public comment today. However, I did receive written comment from John Paul Jones of the Sustainable Englewood Community, and I will distribute that to all the board members immediately following this meeting, sir.
Our next order of business is approval of the minutes. I will now entertain a motion to approve minutes of the regular board meeting of October 13, 2020.
Move.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Director Irvine, seconded by Director Miller. The vote on the minutes. Director Silva.
Yes.
Director Irvine.
Yes.
Director Miller.
Yes.
Director Jakes.
Yes.
Chairman Barkley.
Yes.
The minutes are approved with 5 yes votes, sir.
Our next order of business is executive session. It's my understanding, Karen, there's no executive session today.
That's correct, Chairman. We do not have executive session today.
Our next order of business is board matters. I will now entertain a motion to approve a resolution setting the dates of the October and November 2022 Chicago Transit Board meetings and the time of the November 2022 meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded by Irvine and Miller. The vote, Director Silva.
Yes.
Director Irvine.
Yes.
Director Miller.
Yes.
Director Jakes.
Yes.
Chairman Barkley.
Yes.
The motion to approve next year's schedule is approved with 5 yes votes, sir.
Our next board matter item is an ordinance electing Director Jakes vice chairman of the board. But before we proceed, I'd like to acknowledge former Vice Chair Arabella Alva Rosales and for her efforts and that she's placed on the board over time. So we want to certainly acknowledge her. Before we proceed, I'd like to first, make a comment about Miss Alva Rosales. She was an excellent board member. She provided steady leadership while serving as the acting chair for 9 months following Terry Peterson's retirement in 2020 and was helpful in making my transition into the chairman's role a smooth one. And while Arabelle leaves big shoes to fill, I'm confident in Director Jakes' ability to take on the role of vice chair, apologize. Director Jakes has served as a member of this board since 2019, and his energy and thoughtful contributions are a benefit to this board. Just by way of some biographical information regarding Director Jakes, he's a senior pastor at West Point Missionary Baptist Church in Chicago, Illinois. He has served on the Mayor's Commission for a Safer Chicago under Mayor Emanuel and served on the transition team for Mayor Lightfoot. Currently a working member of the Faith-Based Leaders Advisory Board of the Cook County Public Defender's Office. He is also a member of the Board of Trustees for his alma mater, Elmhurst College, as well as serving as an inaugural member of the President's Council for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion for Elmhurst College. I would now entertain a motion to approve an ordinance electing Reverend Dr. L. Bernard Jakes Vice Chairman of the Chicago Transit Board.
So moved.
So,
Second.
so moved by Director Irvine, seconded by Director Miller. For the vote, Director Silva. Director Silva, the vote on naming a new vice chair. Appointing a new vice.
Yes.
Okay. Director Irvine.
It's a hearty yes for me. Great to have you as vice chair, Director Jakes.
Director Miller.
Certainly, certainly. Congratulations, and that is a yes for me.
Okay. Director Jakes.
Well, seeing that this is Chicago and I can't vote for myself, I will say yes.
Very good. Very smart move, Director Jakes. And Chairman Barkley.
Yes.
Okay, the motion to approve, to appoint Director Jakes as vice chair passes, of course, with 5 yes votes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, can I just say a few words?
Of course.
Before we move on to the next item. First of all, on behalf of the staff, I also want to congratulate Director Jakes on his appointment as vice chair. You did, however, leave off one very important item from his bio, and that is, of course, he is also a proud member of Alpha Phi Alpha fraternity, which that I'm a member of, and we always take a moment to acknowledge that. I also wanted to also just express my appreciation and sincere gratitude to Arabelle Alva Rosales and her time on the board. She was a member of the board when I came back as president of CTA, and I've had the pleasure of working with her over these last 7 years. She has been not only an exemplary board member, but I think really a tremendous colleague to me, as well as to the rest of the staff here at CTA. And her leadership and her understanding, her compassion, her commitment to transit and to equity and to diversity and the many things that she represented as a member of the board will be missed. And she has established, in my opinion, a very strong legacy here at CTA as a member of our board. And I just wanted to express our appreciation on behalf of the staff for her work here on CTA and her, especially her work in the period of transition before Chairman Barkley came to CTA, where she really took on the mantle in the middle of a pandemic, I might add, and provided the type of leadership and support that was really critical for all of us during a very critical time in our agency's history. So I just wanted to say those few words on behalf of the staff here at CTA.
Thank you.
And Chairman Barkley, I also want to just weigh in. I think, Arabelle has been an exemplary board member. I've greatly enjoyed working with her. She's been engaged on so many different issues. And as, both you and President Carter stated, I mean, she really stepped up when Chairman Peterson left and did a fantastic job as acting chair. I'm going to miss her on the board. And I think I'm just really, I appreciate the chance to serve with her, and she contributed so much to the board. So, Arabelle, wherever you are, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I want to echo the same sentiments as relates to Alva Rosales. She was just absolutely fabulous. Did learn a lot from her. And also want to say thank you, everyone, for your confidence in me. I look forward to working with you, and especially with you, Chairman Barkley. You can be Michael Jordan, and I'll be your Scottie Pippen. Before he wrote the book about how he didn't like Michael Jordan, when we were winning championships, I'll be your Scottie. All right.
Let's just get the rings first, right?
Right. We got to get the 6 rings, right? Let's get that Redline Extension going, and we're good to go. President Carter can be our coach, help us get Phil Jackson. Yeah, you'll be Phil Jackson.
Or referee, right?
Right. As long as he's not the referee that pulled that foolishness with the Bears game, we're good.
Chairman Barkley, I just want to join here and voice my sentiment for the great job and how we will certainly miss Arabelle for her service and leadership and my confidence and support of our new vice chair. And to say thank you to Arabelle, wherever you are. I know you're doing well. God bless.
Arabelle, that was a surprise for me. Okay, I really didn't know you were going to give up. But anyway, okay, I mean, you are the second Mexican, okay, when the board, okay. I mean, you and me, okay, I mean, and I really enjoy, okay, spending all this time, okay, with you, okay, and admire, okay, your strong feelings about everything, okay, I mean, good luck.
Our next order of business is a report from the Committee of Finance, Audit, and Budget. Director Silva.
The Committee on Finance, Audit, and Budget met earlier this afternoon. The committee approved the October 13, 2021 committee minutes and reviewed the monthly finance report. The committee also reviewed 5 ordinances. An ordinance amending Ordinance 020-108, approving the fiscal years 2021-2025 capital improvement program. An ordinance adopting a budget for calendar year 2022 and financial plan for calendar years 2023-2024. An ordinance authorizing the implementation of fare structure revisions and approving the title fare change equity analysis. An ordinance approving the fiscal years 2022-2026 capital improvement program and authorizing the filing and executing of grant and cooperative agreements and amendments and related materials. An ordinance authorizing an intergovernmental agreement with the Cook County Assessor's Office to access geographic information system data. The committee also reviewed 5 contracts. The committee approved the 5 ordinances and the 5 contracts. The committee recommends board approval of the omnibus. And that concludes my report, Chairman Barkley.
Thank you, Director Silva. May I now have a motion to approve the omnibus as stated by Director Silva?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Director Irvine, seconded by Director Miller. I'll take a vote on the omnibus. Director Silva.
Yes.
Director Irvine.
Yes.
Director Miller.
Yes.
Vice Chairman Jakes.
Yes.
Chairman Barkley.
Yes.
That motion to pass omnibus is approved with 5 yes votes, sir.
Our next order of business is the construction report.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I'm sorry. Before we begin the construction report, I would just like to take a moment to acknowledge Jeremy and the finance team for all the work that they did on the budget for this year. As you mentioned during the finance committee report, this is a very unusual year for us. We continue to face the challenges and the headwinds around the pandemic and the financial impact it's having on CTA. And I get a lot of credit and kudos for, what I do to lead this agency, through this process, but I wouldn't be able to do it without the fantastic team that I have supporting me. And Jeremy and his team have been creative and innovative and supportive of everything that we need to do to get through this pandemic. And I just wanted to acknowledge that on behalf of the rest of the management team at the board meeting today. Thank you.
Thank you, President Carter. As you know, during the Finance Committee meeting, we made direct comments that are reflective of the great work that your whole team has done, you included, but Jeremy in particular, in basically the professionalism and leadership that you guys have shown throughout this whole budget process. So we want to commend you and thank you to your whole team for all the effort that they put into getting us to this point. Thank you very much. So we're now at the point of the construction report. Bill Mooney.
Good evening. Bill Mooney, I'm your Chief Infrastructure Officer, and I have your construction program monthly update. We'll start where we normally start, our Jefferson Park O'Hare Signals project. Flip slides. So since we last met, we completed the cutover at Old Mannheim Relay House, and we've begun the cutover at Cumberland Relay House. Cumberland is the second to last kind of diamond interlocking. We will be finishing up River Road towards the end of this year, and that will be the last of kind of the major kind of intermittent pieces of interlockings left, and then we'll be moving on to kind of the two pieces of infrastructure left in the project, which is the O'Hare Terminal and the Rosemont Terminal cutovers, which will be at the beginning of next year. Flip into the slides, please. So part of kind of the cleanup of punch list work is removing some of the older infrastructure that's out there. So early on in the project, I showed you the replacement of Foster Relay House. Here's the old relay house actually being removed from the right-of-way after it's been decommissioned. Next slide, please. Preparation for those big cutovers at O'Hare and Rosemont in the upcoming future, we continue to do major infrastructure work along those areas. So here's a conduit installation for runs to wayside signals and other apparatuses. Next slide, please. And here's part of the Cumberland Relay House. So one of the unique parts of this modern system is we're running a lot more on a fiber optic network than we historically have, where historically we've run more on copper. And so here they are commissioning in some of the new fiber optic splicing for that house to going from house to house connections. Next slide, please. My next project is our Refresh and Renewed. Since we last met, we've upped our total on the full program from to 26 stations completed. Most notably that we've closed out 47th and Southport, and we've begun work at LaSalle and Ashland. We're on target to close out this program of all 35 stations by the end of the year. We have advanced the SB painting contractors. The first kind of 2 contractors are on board and starting to get in gear. They've knocked out 6 of the 92 stations that fall into that program. We're also in the process of rebidding 2 of those other contracts. The work has been really, really impressive on behalf of the contractors. My staff has raved about the quality and the detail that they put into it. And they've completed work at 63rd and King Drive, Garfield, Loyola. They're working at 63rd, Davis, 51st, Cottage Grove, Chicago, and the Redline and Sheridan are all in progress. And then we've advanced the directional signage that we've been providing you updates. At this point, we've completed 19 of 29 stations, and all the remainders are on target to be completed by end of year as has been committed. Here's some examples of the work that's been done, kind of our quintessential before-after lighting upgrades, how much brighter that LED upgrade is, how much more transparent that space is, and how much more safe it feels just by being able to see kind of really clearly in all directions. Next slide, please. Here's some exterior lighting. So part of what the effort we've made in a lot of these is to upgrade lighting around the station so that our footprint feels more welcoming, our footprint feels safer around some of the neighborhoods. So here we've added a row of exterior lighting along the station house on the bottom here, as well as we increased lighting up the stairwells and painted all those areas in the fascia across the street here at 47th. This is a pretty big effort. Next slide, please. And again, kind of one of the key things that I've talked about a couple of times is getting into really infrastructure work here, not just kind of cosmetic stuff. So here were some major repairs to the ceiling. There was a lot of rust out kind of substruts they made repairs to, as well as fixing all the drywall, patching it over and plastering it and then repainting it. And it really, again, kind of gets to that theory of broken windows. People walk into the station, they see this type of damage, and it represents poorly on the efforts we've made. So. Here's some of the upgraded painting. Again, just how much cleaner the stairs look with the fresh coat of paint on them. It's again, one of the very focal points customers see as they enter stations, as they climb those stairs. Next slide. Again, here's a really important piece of infrastructure upgrade at 47th Street. So they did tuck pointing to the building. So this was brick repair and tuck pointing edge work. I mean, very foundational structural work for the station, not to be ignored in the effort. Next slide. So this is Southport, again, the stair risers, that again, focal point as people enter and traverse the station, cleaning them up, clearing out the rust spots and getting a nice dark coat of paint on there. Next slide. And here's some of the directional signage upgrades. So this is in the subway at Jackson on the red line. Next slide. Here's some of the SB painting work at Granville and associated with also the LED upgrading lighting there. Again, kind of clean surface, bright lighting. Next slide. Here's another example of the SB painting and stair risers. Again, we really have been impressed with the quality of the work of the contractors and the efforts they put forward. Next slide. And here's another kind of point that we don't often see. So this is the railings at the edge of the station platforms that separate this platform from the right-of-way. It's a yellow railing as a caution and the platform lighting. So you see kind of that refreshed look, how much brighter and aware it is for both customers, my personnel on the right-of-way, Don's personnel operating trains. Next slide. Then we talk a lot about the furniture. So here's some of the elements in the station that, again, get really heavily touched, get beat up a lot, and what that fresh coat of paint really does in that perception of that, the bike racks, the garbage cans, and the recycling bins. So the last piece, kind of under Refresh and Renew, is we introduced a new piece of artwork to our collection. This past month, it was tied actually to the work we did at Western on the Blue Line. This was part of the Refresh and Renewed program, and then we added this kind of art ad as part of the capital program. So this is Remnants. It's by Edra Soto and Dan Sullivan. It's a terrazzo, concrete, and steel. It was a collaborative effort between the artists who fabricated the pieces and our in-house crews who added lighting and the structural pedestals that the pieces sit on. The artists kind of were looking at the area at Western being kind of a collaboration of a series of neighborhoods where they come together at Bucktown and Wicker Park and Humboldt Park and end up being a gathering spot. This area just outside the station seemed like a good effort to kind of talk about that open space and how to activate it and use that space. They were inspired by kind of the Puerto Rican architectural landscape, the use of terrazzo and cement, as well as kind of the wrought iron features around that you see often with our stations and those elements. And they saw this as an opportunity for gathering. It's really durable. It's concrete. It's treated so that we can clean it easily. It's a really neat piece. If you get an opportunity to go out and see it up close, the terrazzo sparkles a little bit in the light. You lose a little bit of it here. Herb, if you can flip to the next slide. And it's unique. It creates different spots to cultivate into, as well as share. There's a couple of adjacent restaurants over there that we would expect that people participating on, transitioning to the station. There's also actually takeout food at the station. There's one of the concession features that you can stop, have a bite while you're waiting for the bus, use the space. You'll note kind of the delineators and the longer pieces to prevent kind of sleeping in those areas. It's holding up well, and it really is a stunning piece to add to our collection. Next slide. The next projects are Jackson Park Track and Structure Improvements Program. We continue to move south from 59th Street. We're now south of 61st Street. We've completed work on the southbound track, and we're currently working on the northbound track. From there, we'll move into the interlocking proper. And structural work continues moving south from there ahead of the track work. Next slide. So here's some of that tie renewal I was just talking about. So you've seen kind of a couple different pictures. A lot of these ties now exceeded 40 years in life, and so well beyond what we'd like to see in investment. And so now we're getting fresh new ties that will buy us another 25 years of solid running service, as well as new rail in this circumstance. And I would also kind of call out, Herb, if you go back one slide. As we're doing a lot of this work under traffic, we started activating certain things we've developed to help the workspace be safer. And so off on the left of this picture, you'll see kind of a guardrail system there with an extra platform that allows us additional working space at that leading edge to the structure so that the crew can actually move about and actually install some of this in a better positioning, and it allows them to have a better safe working environment for fall protection purposes. Next slide. Here's some photos of them actually inserting the ties. So we actually do this from an elevated lift where they actually feed it underneath the rails from the outside in. We actually do the same thing often from the inside. We'll pull out the footwalk on the inside and build footwalk on the outside temporarily so we can actually feed the other track sometimes from that side. Next slide. Here's an example of the iron workers doing some of the flange angel work. They work off of scaffolds up there, really tight up in the structure. He's tied off beyond that. You can see his ribbons there. But here they're bolting up a splice connection on the web plate there. So you can see actually them using kind of the impact guns they use to do that work. Next slide, please. My next projects are South Shop's waste material storage and sewer upgrade project. The project continues on schedule and on budget. Move on to the pictures. So all the work is focused on the waste material storage building right now. So we've got into the earth, we've dug the foundation and started setting it. And you can see in these first couple photos here. Next slide. Here the foundation kind of was set and they started building the walls. So these were actually formed in place and then poured kind of concrete walls installed around that foundation. Next slide. My next project is our Dan Ryan inverters and battery upgrades. So this continues to march to conclusion as we advance down the railroad. We're currently working at 55th and we'll be moving to 23rd shortly. Here's some pictures of the work out there. Again, this is I think I talked a little bit about last month is part of the upgrade of this project is isolating out the inverters, which work off our traction power system from the relay houses, which also share a ComEd feed and have a different kind of grounding system, so that we're actually installing these free floating platforms to separate that equipment in a way and isolate it differently. So you can see one of these platforms being flown in at 87th Street. Next slide. Here they are actually doing some of the welding to secure that platform and make it smooth around the edges, eliminate tripping hazards as they go and start wiring up some of this equipment. Next slide. And my last project today is my second to last project is our northbound state in Dearborn. This project is readily coming to conclusion as well. We are finishing up our last weekends on the blue line, as well as we have a little bit of work left on the red line that will be picked up one weekend. We can move on to the pictures. This has been a really successful project for us. The value of investment in the water treatment and the track here will buy us a lot of time in these subways. It's a very challenging environment for us to manage the water around. So here you can see overhead crack injection. This is where we actually drill into the sealing membrane, and we float in cement that allows us to kind of seal up a bunch of holes that are behind there and keep the water from directly falling on the tracks and divert it to the sewer system. Next slide. Here they are doing plate replacement along the curves near division. A lot of what we see in the deterioration from the water is actually at that plate element where we attach the rail to the ties. And so we've actually been replacing those plates and replacing the core of the cores that secure that plate to the concrete tie, and then ultimately the clips that secure the rail to that piece. So here they are in the preparation of that process. Next slide. Here's kind of finished project. So at the end of the day, after they do all this installation, they go through and they clean away all the debris and sludge that's built up kind of from water infiltration, clear it out of the track. And then we've got a nice new basic surface that they're leaving behind. Next slide. And my last project for today is our Irving Park Station Escalator and Canopy Replacement Project. So we've advanced the demolition on the platform. So at this point, we're removing kind of the what were the clear bubble canopy features here everywhere except over the escalators. While we start to demo out and paint that area, and then as we work through the escalators, we'll actually replace those as well. The escalators are coming in the near upcoming winter season, and we're working quickly to get painting in before the freeze. Next slide, please. So here's some of that canopy demolition. So at the end of the day, all these kind of faded out clear bubbles go away, and we get a nice translucent blue canopy, very similar to what you've seen at Jefferson Park or Garfield. It's kind of our modern standard, really opens up and brightens up that sheltering of that environment. But most importantly, it's sealed again. It provides weather protection for both the equipment, the escalators that we'll be installing new, as well as the people waiting on those platforms. Next slide. Here's some of the painting work. So they scrape down all the old, they grind it out, and then they start a primer coat, and then they'll do a finish coat before the canopy goes on top. Next slide. And with that, I'll turn it over to Chris. Are there any questions for me?
Let's start with you. Chairman Barkley, any questions for Bill?
No questions.
Director Jakes?
I don't know if this is for Bill or Chris. Is there any update regarding the machine that had fallen, I guess, about a couple of months ago?
Chris comes up next, Director.
Okay, so that's Chris. Okay,
he'll be coming up next. Yeah, right, okay. RPM will be coming right after we're done with Bill. Director Miller, any questions for Bill Mooney?
No question.
Director Irvine?
No questions. Just thanks, Bill, to you and your team. Great report. Great work.
Director Silva?
No questions.
All right. Chairman Barkley, there are no further questions for Bill Mooney's part of the construction report.
We will now call on Chris Bushell and Juan Pablo Prieto to make their RPM and diversity presentations.
Thank you, Chairman. RPM continues. Chris Bushell, your Chief RPM Officer. The RPM project continues tight to schedule on budget. If we could turn it to the next slide. Next slide. So the primary work that's been occurring since our last report really is focused on the bypass. There has been a number of structural pieces, mostly connecting the bypass at both the north end. We'll see some photographs of that in a minute, as well as the south end. The south end, we actually built a bridge off to the side and then used a sophisticated system of hydraulic lifts to move it into place, wheeled hydraulic lifts. It is a significant effort as compared to sort of the 100 or so tons that the Traverse building weighed. This was about 650 tons. We'll see some photographs of that in a minute. In addition, on the Lawrence effort, we are not doing any work with regard to the caissons, but Director Jakes, I can answer any questions at the end about that. But we are advancing the project in other areas while the contractor does a safety study relative to the equipment involved with that incident and makes various submittals to us. The work that continues there, though, is other types of work. They have assembled the gantry and are doing various testing and commissioning relative to that gantry. In addition, they're advancing the project in other ways with regard to various preparation associated with drilling caissons or doing demolition. If we can go to the slides now. So I mentioned the connection of the bypass on the north end. This is an open deck area where it's like an articulated structure rather than sort of a cast in place structure. Over a weekend several weeks ago, we installed the interlocking that you see here. It's not yet interlocked. It's actually just a turnout, but it will be interlocked in the future. So it sits out there and has been completed. Next slide. This is a picture, kind of gives you a bit of an idea of the sweep of the bypass. Gives you a picture of what we'll eventually be running on. The next picture, please. And then here in the bottom left, you see the piece of structure that we built off to the side. Did some demolition and then subsequently slid into place, much the same way that we moved the Traverse building over. With, I said, the exception that this is about 6 times heavier and significantly more complicated move. Next. Demolition on the Lawrence to Bryn Mawr segment continues. We have completed the demolition of the viaducts on the east side of the Lawrence to Bryn Mawr segment. That's where we're going to be building the segment of box girder bridge with the gantry and the first pass. Next. And these are various structural components upon which the segmented box girder will rest. And there are places where the caissons are drilled, where we're currently casting various components, the column, and then the column, the top of the cap of the column as well. So that work continues. Next. And then the gantry. As long as a 747, as long as a football field, it's big. It's an important component of this project that helps us to safely and efficiently construct the segmented box girder. This type of bridge offers the CTA lots of advantages. The ease of construction that minimizes the number of caissons that are needed on the project overall. Generally speaking, our existing steel spans about 50 feet. These segmented box girder bridges can span twice that, so minimizes the number of caissons we have to drill, which is a significant expense and impact to the community around it. Next. And of course, our outreach continues. It is an integral part of this project. We continue to work very closely with the 44th Ward. Had a number of good meetings with them recently. The Lawrence to Bryn Mawr project, various updates for the 48th, Taste of Uptown, and then various other open office hours and open for business activities to support some of these businesses during the difficult times. So with that update, I will turn it over to Juan Pablo for workforce and DBE.
Thanks, Chris. Good afternoon, directors. Juan Pablo Prieto, Director of Diversity Programs. Diversity continues to meet with the contractor monthly to discuss DBE and workforce outreach and compliance. We also continue to send out opportunities from the contractor to the DBE community so they're aware of the trade packages and how to submit their bids. As I reported last month, we held our first in-person RPM, DBE, and workforce outreach event in over a year and a half on September 28th. The contractor continues to send out trade packages to firms that they have met through all their outreach events that have, they are on track with their plan to meet both their DBE and workforce commitments. On October 13th, we hosted our latest installment of our Construction Talk series with the Painters District Council number 14. The virtual event featured a pre-recorded tour of the District Council training facility in Berkeley, Illinois, interviews with apprentice and staff members from the training facility, and a live question and answer session with the attendees. The event was recorded and is uploaded to our CTA Doors Opening YouTube page. As of October 31st, DBEs have been awarded over $180.2 million between the design and construction packages, and those dollars have been awarded to 71 unique DBE firms. The contractor has made an effort to provide additional opportunities for firms that are currently working on RPM to win more scopes, as well as engaging with firms that are not currently on the project to discuss opportunities for them to submit bids. Of the 71 unique DBE firms on the project, 25 are new to CTA. On the workforce side, as of October 31st, RPM has produced over 547,000 labor hours, and contractor and subcontractor employees have earned over $31 million in wages. These figures represent family-sustaining middle-class jobs, which is why we continue to outreach to the community to ensure that residents of economically disadvantaged areas have the resources to access these careers. That concludes my portion of the report. I'll now turn it back over to Chris for our video.
We're actually going to hold for the video this week, but are there any questions?
This is Kevin. Chris, I'm just wondering what's the progress, or what are the next steps with the bypass?
Well, we are completing commissioning, and we'll make announcements shortly as to when it's going to open up.
Okay, and then the follow-up is, are we going to get a chance to ride on it like the first day?
Director, if you'd like to be one of the first people to ride on it, by all means.
As long as it's not 4 in the morning.
Like a ride, we can arrange for that.
Well, I just want to have the first public ride, but thank you.
It could be early.
We will reach out to you, Director Irvine, and see if we can coordinate the timing for it. As Chris indicated, we should be opening it very shortly, and we'll certainly reach out to you and see if we can get you on one of the first trains.
Thanks so much.
I should extend that offer to the entire board. I don't mean to leave anyone out. If any of you would like to do it, we'll certainly work to make sure that you all get a chance to ride on the bypass.
Unmute yourself, Greg.
Sorry. Director Jakes, you had a question. Why don't we go straight to you for Chris?
No, Chris answered it. Thank you.
Oh, Chris
He
answered
answered it in his report. Yeah.
He answered his report. Okay. So let's go back to Chairman Barkley. Any questions, sir?
No questions.
Director Miller.
No question.
Director Silva.
No question.
Director Irvine, do you have any other questions, or you took care of that?
Oh, I took care of it. Thanks, though.
Okay, I think that we got everybody. So Chairman Barkley, all the questions are in for Chris and Juan Pablo.
Okay. Our next order of business is new business. Greg, is there any new business today?
No, sir, there is not.
Okay. There being no further business to come before the board, may I have a motion to adjourn the Chicago Transit Board meeting of November 17, 2021?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Director Irvine, seconded by Director Miller. Let's take the final vote of the day. Director Silva, adjournment.
Agree.
Agree. Director Irvine.
Yes.
Director Miller.
Yes.
Director Jakes.
Yes.
Chairman Barkley.
Yes. And may everyone have a happy and safe Thanksgiving.
Thank you. Same to you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. We're adjourned with the 5 yes votes. Thank you all.
Thanks.